It's Saturday Night Live. Okay, it's Wednesday afternoon, but same thing. Here we go. Short intro. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people around the world. And why do we say categorically that every single person who's tuned in to the marriage webinar is good-looking? Because by definition, if you made the time to tune in, it's because you're always looking for and finding the good. That's a definition of a good-looking person, looking for and finding the good. This is the marriage webinar. We, I believe, are in our third year, kids. You hear that? Third year. Yeah. Now it's hard to believe because we started when Diane was 16, Maura was 17, and Lori, who's the oldest one, not me, I'm not excluding me, is on a plane right now. She's allowed to fly, but she won't be here with us today because of restrictions. They call it. You can't do a marriage webinar from the sky. I don't know why, but they won't let her do it. So it's going to be the three of us kids, and we have a very, very interesting discussion and lots of questions that are very touchy, emotional, fascinating, because they're going to allow us to talk about the present and the future. We're going to involve the Pope, His Holiness. We're going to talk about Elon Musk, his richness. We're going to talk about millennials, their confusion. Okay, I didn't mean it like that. But yes, by definition, if you're in your 20s, you're confused. That's only because I was in my 20s. These two young ladies here, they're about to enter their 20s. They'll find out what it means to be confused. And when I say confused, it's not in the pejorative. It's only in the sense that there's just not enough world knowledge yet about the world, about people, and about your own growth, that to give you sufficient clarity. You may think you have clarity at the moment, but life does change and things happen. We call it stuff, STUFF, stuff. And therefore, it's more difficult in your 20s to be clear. But we're going to help clear up some of that stuff. And we're going to talk about right away a very large, disturbing idea that is existing in the world. I said I started off with the Pope, His Holiness, because I'm going to give you an insight of what he wrote recently, apparently said also in I think it was online, actually. I don't think he did it in public. But he wrote that in Europe especially, but in America as well, but Europe and especially, he was decrying the fact that people are using pets as a substitute for children. Those are his words, not my words. I mean, obviously, I'm not quoting exactly, but that was the gist of the issue. And when I threw this out to a lot of people online that like to know about the marriage webinar and ask questions, I got back, we had almost 63 questions on this particular issue because it is fascinating. I'll just give you two quick statistics, and I'm going to ask a question and have Diane and Maura speak about the issue, and I may speak as well. But the fact of the matter, in the United States at least, over the past 2 years of the pandemic and all the things that have happened, it is the largest rate of adoption of dogs specifically, and cats also, but dogs specifically, in the history of keeping records of adoptions. It's hard to go to a shelter and find dogs that are available. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you just a quick story. My son is a dog lover, not a lover, but he likes dogs, as did Michael Medved in another incarnation, right, Diane? I mean, you don't have him anymore, but he was very, very attached to his dogs. He really, okay, I'll say, I think they ate out of his mouth one time. That's another story. And maybe vice versa. Okay, wait, we're getting into nitty gritties. But the point is that when Ezra and Shoshi wanted to adopt a dog, they were on a waiting list. They had to be scrutinized. What kind of home do you have, et cetera. And now nobody came to visit the home. But so this was going on. So pets became a comfort tool for people during lockdown. And I can understand it fully. But apparently, what the Pope was talking about is that this is now endemic to the pandemic and becoming part and parcel of a way of life, because people, if they are getting married, and that's a different story, which we'll talk about maybe later, they are not considering having family, meaning children, progeny. So the questions we have, again, 63 questions on the same topic of the following. I'm going to phrase it as one person said. Sorry to say it like this. What right does the Pope have to tell me what to do about with my life? But let's go and phrase it a little nicer and say, is the Pope correct, not just in his observation, which is factual, but in his observation of the human condition, which he says creates a, what did he call it? A stinginess of soul. I think that was the phrase. A stinginess of soul by focusing on pets rather than considering children. So that's the question, Dr. Diane Medved, Maura Sweeney, the ambassador of happiness. Does having pets and adopting pets, is that in any way a stinginess of soul? Diane, you're up first, kid.
You're always first, Diane. I love it when you're first.
Yeah. I always look forward to your answers because that's all the stuff I wish I had said. In terms of, you put it in terms of stinginess of soul, I mean, I don't think that's the assumption. I think the assumption, perhaps on the Pope's part, not that I could speak for him, is that people have a need to give love. That's not my phone. People have a need to give love. That we know whose phone that was. And so where are they going to give it? And I think the Pope is wrong in saying it's a stinginess of soul that makes them want to get pets, because you have to give to a pet. Also, you have to be responsible for a pet as well. And frankly, you get less rewards from a pet than you do from a child. Because I remember thinking as a parent and now as a grandparent, thinking, where do people get laughs and joy if not from children? And yes, you can get them for pets. And I don't think it's a stinginess of spirit. I think what it is a need to give. It's chesed, as we say in Hebrew, the idea that you want to give and you want to give to a pet. That's great. What that's saying, though, is that you don't feel ready, competent, desirous of bringing a child into your life. And perhaps you realize what a huge responsibility that it is a lifetime that you are going to be connected to this person and responsible for this person, even as adults. There's no such thing as turning off parenthood when your kids grow up. So I think there is a awareness of the completeness of the connection to a child, and almost a fear now of a world in which there are pandemics and there are wars and there is environmental disaster looming. People are afraid to make that long-term commitment sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so they look for another way to give. And that is the opposite of a stinginess. That's wanting to be generous. However, I think that it's easy to say I'll commit to a cute, darling puppy, and not so easy to say I'll commit to this amorphous, non-existent yet person who could turn out wonderful and could turn out differently than I would want. And when you have a child, it's everything. It's all consuming. I think that a lot of people who get pets, however, end up having children. I did for years workshops at UCLA where I worked with people making the childbearing decision. And it was called Children to Have or Have Not. And most of the people who came to that workshop, we evaluated the emotional sides and the emotional things that you can get from kids, the emotional costs of kids, and all the physical, the financial, the room, the impingements, everything that has to do with the decision of having children, to look toward the future and feel as prepared to make that decision as possible. After most of the people went through it, I'd say 90% of them decided to have children.
To have children.
To have children. But they felt better prepared, knowing what was going to be the changes that they would have to endure in their life. So I think that it's something that even with pets, that can be almost a gateway to children for some couples.
Pets are a gateway drug.
I mean,
Right.
it can be. But pets in and of themselves bring so much joy and have so much to give that we really need to look at that as something positive in our culture that people want to give. And it's really important that we not condemn those who choose to do it.
I'm first of all, Diane, I am overjoyed at what you just shared with us, because not only do I think it's insightful, but I think it is a great balance to the question that came up, because it bothered me, this idea of stinginess of soul. But I think also you mentioned two fascinating ideas when it comes to a pet, and I don't want to say in the same sentence, or having child or children. And that is that by definition, a pet is not going to live for a much long time, 6 years, 8 years, 12, 15. But the point is that with a child, it is a lifelong commitment. So it's the difference is not just one of, how should we say it, of status. It's one of complete difference, because one is you, and like you said, how a child or children turn out, it's unknown in the best of homes, right? Mm-hmm. And in the worst of homes, the opposite. So one never knows. And yet with a pet, like you said, you get to take care of it and such like that. There is some reciprocity in the sense that, isn't it wonderful when you come home and the dog comes running and shaking, wagging his tail and pees all over the floor, and you laugh about it. Okay. I think you've made some really fine points that we can use to go on to next levels and some of the other questions. So wonderful, Maura, would you please speak to either the stinginess of the soul or the expansion of the soul vis-a-vis children, pets but pets as a substitute even sometimes for children?
Well, Barry, I was actually going to ask you to go back to the original statement that the Pope made. I remember seeing it as a headline because his comments always make headlines. I didn't remember the stinginess of the soul remark, which made me feel like, oh, there was something so negative in the comment. I don't even want to go there.
Yeah, it was deep it was deep inside. And I say this with great respect. I don't think he meant it in a negative way. I think he was saying to people, be aware that you're not expanding your soul when you are choosing pets over children.
Okay. The first comment, I was trying to think, the original headline I saw was he was noticing that young people are not having children. The trend has been to have pets instead. Okay. That was what I wanted to concentrate on, because I wanted to start with something. When the pandemic started, my husband and I had gone across the street. We have this cute little old lady who comes in to visit her son. She's from Greece. And so she speaks with the accent. We're all sitting around a big table. And she said to us with her accent, she said, 9 months from now, we're going to see lots of babies out there. And everybody at the table started laughing. In her mind, she was thinking everyone was starting to stay at home. This was before the pandemic really reached the proportions it had gotten. In her mind, and she's probably in her late 80s, she was thinking, we're going to have loads of children. We're going to have loads of baby, like a brand new baby born. So this is what's so fascinating, is that here we are, and it appears to be just the opposite. So that must be that during this era, people who might have had more children maybe chose not to. And I think a lot of that was attributable to not only the situation where, let's say, the uncertainty, especially millennials, a lot of them are still in school, getting started, etc. It's an expensive way to live for two people, let alone three or more. But I think that there might have been some added fear of the future, the uncertainty that would have caused people to possibly, I wasn't in anybody's bedroom or around their table to discuss it, that they were saying maybe now is not the time to have a child. But here's what I want to say. I totally agree with Diane that dogs, puppies, they can be a gateway to children. My husband and I tried since we were married, to have children. I thought we'd have 4. We had our first when we were married 11 years. And let me tell you this crazy thing. On our 10th anniversary, my husband said, "What would you like?" And I said, "Oh, I think I'd love a puppy." And my husband couldn't stand dogs. Oh, hated dogs. And I said, "Oh, Jimmy, I'd love a
Wait a
little."
minute. He likes cats?
Well, no, he didn't like cats either.
Oh,
But
goldfish. He likes goldfish. Okay.
no, he didn't like that. So we bring home a little boxer puppy, and I will tell you, my husband, who never liked dogs, fell in love with the puppy. And very shortly thereafter, what do we find out? But I'm pregnant. I will say this in terms of being a gateway. Imagine being married for a decade. And I was busy working. And so we had a life of 2 separate people running all the time. By having a puppy and having to train a puppy, I learned how to be a parent to this little growing entity that needed my attention constantly. And I will tell you this, that change in my life of all of a sudden now focusing on something that was very vulnerable, that needed attention, needed boundaries, etc., was one of the best things for me. And then it was a wonderful, I don't want to say helper to our daughter. I mean, that dog was always around our daughter. But I would say that yes, the puppies, the dogs, maybe cats, they are wonderful gateways because it helps you expand your heart. Suddenly now it's not just about you. It's just not about where you're going to run and go. Now everything in your life revolves around, I have someone else to care for. And even with a puppy, I mean, there is so much love. There's a lot of work, but there's a lot of love in the dogs. And the other point I wanted to make about children, this is something I started noticing the past few years. Where were all the babies? How come nobody was having babies? But I would say the past few months in our area, I am seeing more families out there with the little carriages and babies. And this is the one thing I want anybody who's listening tonight. There is something about having a child, whether you are the parent of a child or the grandparent of a child, probably the aunt or an uncle of a child. A newborn baby brings such a sense of hope for the future. And we can very quickly, when we get afraid, decide to pull back and not think of the future, but to have a child all of a sudden puts a whole new sense of hope, a new spirit, a new sense of expectation. And it's a lot of work, as we all know, having a baby, a child, a lot of responsibility, but the amount of love that it expands within people's hearts and experiences, you have to experience it to know it. And so whoever is listening tonight, I would say there have been times in life that have been good to have babies, or let's say more optimal, maybe the 50s, right? And more challenging, maybe during the depressions of the 1920s when people didn't have as much food. And yet sometimes they had lots of children, but having children brings people a sense of planning and hoping for the future and also expanding. And when we live only to ourselves, we kind of lose out on that. We lose something of the spirit and the hope for tomorrow.
So I think you just hit on the Pope's message, which was the Pope was giving hope. And at least the way I read what he was talking about, it wasn't chastising, it was urging, it was trying to expand. And by the way, where you live in southern Florida, Maura, I think there's a lot of very large Greek population, isn't there?
We're on west coast of Florida, mid center, but I will tell you, we have plenty of Greeks around here. And then we have one neighborhood several miles away. It might as well have been Greece moved into town.
Well, it is. I knew somebody in that area, and I think she told me that it's one of the largest populations or population centers of Greeks outside of Greece.
Tarpon Springs, big connection. You cannot live there unless your name ends with an IS.
Right, or you speak the language somehow. So you touched on a number of different points, and I want to just make mention. You're right. The Pope was actually speaking more to millennials than to anybody else, in the sense that the millennials are the future. We talk about millennials, let's just say between the ages of 19 and 28, I think is the in quotation marks, that generation. But
They go up to
oh, they're older now? Okay, so millennials are already old. We're talking about Gen Z. Gen Z. Yeah, then there's Gen XYZ, and then there's Alpha, Beta, Gamma. Okay, but the point is speaking Greek. But the issue you raise is one of very interesting from the point of view of this older woman who said, "Oh, we'll have babies," because unfortunately, what she was not taking into account is that people were and are fearful. And I think if we're going to use 4-letter words, fear, hope, love, grow, care, these are all wonderful words, but fear has been, in my humble opinion, the dominant feeling in the country, if not the world, in the past 2 years. And that fear translates into a pulling in, and I think you said it so wonderfully, Diane, and Maura, you seconded, and the ability to have, let's say, a pet, just using the dog as a cat example, is cats less so, the ability to come out of that place and be a giver. The only way you're going to move from fear into some hope or courage is through the process of giving. I mean, it's so wonderful that it does act that way. Giving enhances more giving. And the more one gives, the more you feel that you want to give, right? I mean, in Hebrew, we have the word natan, or natsan, and it's spelled as a palindrome. It reads forwards and backwards the same way, because the essence of giving is just that. You give and it gives more. And we all know that giving and receiving are part and parcel of the same process. So when you give to that puppy, as it were, what do you get back? That slobbering and jumping and saying, ah, especially from a boxer. The shaking of the head. I grew up with you're making me think of this because it's so fun. We grew up, we didn't have a dog until I was, I think, 14. But one of my friends who lived just far enough away in a larger state, we didn't, but he lived in a larger state, and they raised prize boxers, to show at shows. And their kennels were cleaner than most people's and bigger than most people's homes. But they had 20 of these prize boxers. And I remember first time we went to the house, they had 2 or 3 walking around. And these are beautiful, beautiful dogs, but they knew they owned the house, and they came and look at me like, "Who are you?" And I'm just a kid, so I got a little nervous until I went there several times, and they liked me, and they licked me and stuff. But yes, boxers happen to be beautiful, and dogs can be that. But it's the idea of opening up in the kids. So let's talk about what we are most interested in, that is marriage. So I'm going to just mention something that Elon Musk has been ranting about lately. Some people call it raving, but I call it ranting. And I do believe that he has a very important point. And the point he is making, if you read any of his things that he's publishing or speaking, is that the greatest danger for the world is not overpopulation. It's not even environmental issues. It's population decline. So if you look at statistics, which most people don't like to because they don't make us feel good, in Japan, it's a country that, according to statistics, who knows what's going to happen, obviously, in 100 years from now, there will be such a small population that they won't have enough people to take care of people, because you need 2.1 children per family to just maintain. Obviously, you need more to grow. And they're at about 1.3. So they're half the rate of growth. Mm-hmm. And their population is aged and aging. The number of people, thank God, in Japan that live longer because of lifestyle and such is quite large. And it's hard to take care of them, both in terms of money, time, effort, etc. Taking care of parents is like having a puppy. I mean, I'm saying that nicely. it becomes a full-time job. And they do pee all over the floor and all kinds of things. Okay, I'm saying, be careful, Mr. Short. So Elon Musk's point is that in the developed world, in the United States, we are below the 2.1. We're at 1.8. And for us, the balance could be immigration. But natural productivity is not happening. So when your nice lady says, sweetly, oh, gonna have a lot more babies, she's thinking blackout in New York City. Remember that famous incident? And there was a population explosion because there was no fear and it was in the dark. Let's have fun. But Elon Musk is pointing out that if you want to have a productive society, you need to have productive people. In other words, is marriage, first of all, is under attack, and millennials are, as a group, less connected to religion, we know this, less connected to historical understanding of America, less connected to a sense of the future, meaning I would like to and want to get married. And then the question comes, is marriage in itself the process, or is mating part of marriage? Is it a necessary part? Because you touched on it, Maura, you touched on it, Diane, the cost of raising a child or children in terms of money, time, emotion, is, compared to almost any time prior to today, astronomical. And it's daunting. So the question, I'm going to try and make it as a question, because we had, I think this got over 85 sort of questions about, is marriage the goal I want, or is it mating in marriage the goal that I want? In other words, are they separate, or are they inextricably linked? You hear the question?
It's a little confusing, the question. I mean, I can answer.
Yes, please. Well, this is your field. If you can't answer it, who can?
Well, it is my field, and I think it's a pity that marriage and childbearing have become less linked. And the fact that you would even say that question is reflective of a kind of selfishness and a change in the values across the country. I think children are necessary. And when I was in college, Paul Ehrlich wrote a book called The Population Bomb that suggested that children were going to be the problem, that it was going to ruin the environment, and we would never be able to survive because we'd have too many people on the planet using the same amount of resources. And how are we ever going to survive this? So we all have to stop having children. China took it seriously and said you can only have one because they believed that. Now, of course,
by the way, just to put a little fine tune here, this was in the 60s or 70s he wrote this, right?
Yes.
Right. Again, think of this was half a century ago. He was wrong then, he's wrong today. But yes, please continue.
He was wrong. And now everyone's admitting it. China has changed their one-child policy to be you can have 3. People in the United States are like you, suggesting that immigration might be a good thing, that keeping out all the immigrants, those are the people who are self-motivated, who want to come here for a better life. Those are the kind of people we need. Those are the ones who are willing to give up everything in a corrupt society, wherever they came from, or a dangerous society, wherever they came from, and come here because it's the land of opportunity. We should be welcoming those people as not only a solution for the underpopulation problem, but because they're the kind of people who will give their effort and their intelligence and their everything in order to create a future that is positive. That's all they want, and that's what they have to offer, and we should recognize that. As far as marriage and childbearing go, there are many, many statistics of all sorts showing that children who are raised in a married 2-parent home have the most advantages. There are 2 parents to love them, first of all, and they don't have a dual identity. Often they're having to divide their time between mother and father's domiciles. That's not good. Or people even who live together and have children don't have that security or promise that there will be a future together. Every day is evaluated anew, and children know the difference between a married family and a non-married family. There are so many single parents now. It's okay for women to have babies without husbands. And I think that's kind of a regression because it leaves them with more responsibility and more work and more worries only on their shoulders. It makes life harder for them. And I don't think that we can turn to government to fill in the role of a spouse. And I don't think we can certainly turn to government to fill the role that a loving spouse provides. I think marriage is the bedrock of society. It's the first institution. In the beginning of the Bible, God made it such that man and woman came out of one person because they needed a helpmate. What does that mean? Someone to help you. A man needs someone to help him, and a woman the same. It's really much better for children, for adults, for everyone concerned, and certainly for society, if we have stable families that raise children in a secure environment. That's going to give them the best advantages. It's going to give them the least challenges. And so should we unentangle marriage and childbearing just because we need more kids? No, we should try reinforcing marriage first and foremost. And if it's a selfish culture, you get the most if you have somebody who loves you. Now, of course, you have to be a less selfish person and be able to give also. And that's the trouble, is our expectations of marriage have declined such that we think to ourselves, oh, well, this doesn't feel good today, so I don't want to be in it anymore. It isn't, gee, this doesn't feel good today. What can I do to enhance the relationship so it does feel good? We have to change those attitudes, and we have to talk about it. And Barry, you're doing a wonderful job, and Maura, to try and keep this in the dialogue. So we're thinking about the fact that marriage is the first and foremost institution on earth, and we need to bring children into loving marriages for their benefit, and to also inspire people to have more children. Because if you have a loving, stable relationship, you're much more able to provide for children, even if it's not monetary as much as giving and caring and sharing and loving. It becomes much easier when you share the wealth, the love in a family. And so I think that will also inspire people to have more children. So it all comes back to marriage. So thank you, Barry, for providing this opportunity to say that.
Diane, this was I'm so glad it's being broadcast and recorded because people want to hear this. The message is so powerful. It is really exhilarating to experience this kind of dynamic interplay of wonderful minds and hearts that are encouraging, because it does take courage. By the way, I just understand something. Is the divorce rate increasing? Is it stable? Is it declining? Where are we going with that at the moment?
Well, the thing, first of all, you should know there's never been a 50% divorce rate.
By the way, I want you to repeat that only because the myth is wrong.
The myth is wrong. There's never been a divorce rate that high ever, even at the peak of divorce, which was in the 1980s. Now, the reason why the divorce rate has been declining is partially because people who get married are more committed, but secondly, because people aren't getting married as much. So, of course, there's going to be less divorces if there are less marriages. So it's kind of a chicken and egg kind of thing. I don't think it's good that people are not getting married, but it is good that they're not divorcing as much. So both things are happening. And the divorce rate, however, is to me far too high because there's so much support in our culture for divorce. It's almost considered normal. There's no stigma. Not that anyone who's been divorced should suffer a stigma, but on the other hand, in their own minds, they should feel it's something they want to avoid. It should be something that's considered a negative for their resume, for their life, for what they want on their tombstone. Do you want to have, 3 wives listed? Or
Right.
It seems to me that any sane person would want to be in a loving, secure relationship for their whole life and would want to do what they could to be the cause of it being that way. So is the divorce rate going down? Yes, in a way.
But because maybe of the factors contributing are not healthy. By the way, you're saying something remarkable. I'm going to try and sum it up, and you may not agree with the words, but marriage is a for want of a better term, a skill set. Uh, People tend to think, I think, Maura, you mentioned this a number of months ago, that I think before you got married, the church has a counseling program that they urge young adults to come to.
Pre-Cana that the Catholics do.
Yeah.
Yes. I
So
told you that.
it's important. I think it's important to understand for people that when you're entering into this holy state, let's call it that. By the way, both ways, HOLY and WHOLY, because you're wholly giving yourself over to a holy situation. And if you do that, you need certain skills. Like you mentioned, Diane. I mean, the ability to become a giver doesn't happen overnight because you say, well, I'm getting married. I need to become a giver. That's a process of the human condition. But it's also important that one knows that when husband and wife, of whatever gender, are about to enter into this holy state, holy, wholesome, holy state, that there are expectations from both sides. And if they're spoken about, I think that that goes a long way to potentially lessen the prospect of, like you said, hey, I just don't feel right today. I think it's time to get out of this, which is a pity. So, wonderful Maura, let's ask you the same question about marriage and mating. Are they inextricably linked? And because, as we said, millennials are marrying later. In other words, if the average marriage age, whatever you calculate that was, let's just pick a number and say it was 25 or 26 2 decades ago. Maybe it's 29 to 31 today. But by the way, for both men and women, it's more difficult for women, I think, at the age of 30, 31 to be married than it is for a man, because the woman, by definition, is going to bear, if can be, children. And it's more difficult at the age of 30, 31 to 32. So is marriage and mating, are they inextricably linked? Because you mentioned something very personal, which I didn't know before, Maura, and we shared this in common. We didn't have a child for the first 10 years.
Oh, I didn't. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's especially in our community, Diane and myself, and in the Jewish, even in the Catholic world, you get married, you have kids. Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, like you said. At 4 we'll consider stopping, but the point is that to not have one for 10 or 11 years, that's interesting. So, but your marriage didn't disintegrate because of that, because marriage was the goal, not just mating.
And maybe for some people that years ago, I think people got married in order to procreate. But, this question is massive. You could go in so many directions with it.
Which we will. We might continue this for the next one. I mean, I love the ideas.
It's a good one. I'll go all over the place of ideas that were coming to mind. I remember a time, let's say 10 years ago. No, it could be 15 years ago. All of a sudden noticing that there were some people getting pregnant, girls obviously, getting pregnant, unmarried, and waiting. And they would have had a boyfriend, or let's say even a fiance. And they'd say, well, we're going to have the baby. And then maybe when the baby's 2, we'll get married. And I remember thinking, what? Why are you doing this backwards? And I'm thinking, don't you want to? I didn't understand it. To me, it seemed like they were putting themselves in a place to make life so complicated from the very beginning. I didn't understand. It was kind of like putting the cart before the horse. But it's so interesting the way things in the culture move and shift over time. Now, when we were growing up during our era, I'm sure most of the moms were home or somewhere near the home. So the house was a home, and the children could be at home, and they felt like they were part of a family. One of the other things I remembered is after I had our daughter, I had a corporate career. I was constantly working. So Fortunately, I was able to stay home when I had her, but I could remember being out early in the morning in the car, and I could see this young mom. It must have been wherever I was driving early mornings. She would pull up at a daycare center. She had a little navy blue BMW. Like you could tell she was one of those women that was going to do well in life, probably better than her mother. And she had this little baby she would drop off at a big daycare center. You know, it was like a corporate kind of a daycare center. And I thought, oh my goodness, she was trying to maybe be all she wanted to be, and this little child was going to be without a mom. Now I realize all of us have different eras that we go through, different challenges, but I offer that to say there's been this shift that's taken place. You know, I look back and I think, I'm so grateful I was to be able to be at home with my daughter. She absorbed so much of family life because she was there. She food shopped with me. She cooked with me. She helped me clean. We took care of the dogs. And, you know, she was back and forth with me to her father's office. And there was this sense that we were a family. And I think this is where I want to kind of even go in again to more of the cultural shift. We no longer have the same markers in the world or in our country that we used to have, where that was good. You find someone you love, you commit to each other, then you bring children into the world. And yes, there's going to be challenges all the way through. Everybody's going to be growing in different ways, but there was a unit. And even when there were challenges, there was also a sense of security. Because I've also had some adult friends of mine whose parents divorced when they were, let's say, 18, and it threw them overboard. Like they felt like they lost their foundation. So I don't know. I cannot speak for everybody's marriage. I know some people have challenging marriages. But generally, having children within the confines of a marriage, even if it's not ideal, is so much more than not having parents and not having two parents under the same roof and not having that balance effect, you know, where the father plays one role, the mother plays another. And here's the thing, both roles can be strong and powerful roles and influential roles in the home. The other point I wanted to make, for whatever it's worth, because we're kind of going all over with this thing, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Our daughter got married at 27. She was not a dater. This was only the second man that she was ever interested in, and they just hit it off beautifully. Now, I will tell you that my daughter's now 27, 29. She was 27 when she married. Her husband, almost 30. I will tell you, those two have been to more weddings. And this is interesting. They have flown everywhere. They've gone back to New York. They have been to so many weddings, which I thought was quite interesting. So they are within the millennial class of people era. And somewhere during the past few years, many of these young people have chosen to get married. Now, I haven't heard anything about children, but this has been the new trend. They're all getting married. So maybe it's something new. The last thing I want to say, for whatever this is worth, it's kind of throwing it out there. I think about culture all the time, and I'm very much aware of popular culture. And just my husband and I, we don't even watch regular TV, but we'll have a couple of CBS shows we watch periodically. And I said to my husband, do you realize that if we watch TV, and we watch a lot of like the crime shows, I said, tell me, Jimmy, what show is on TV right now other than Young Sheldon? What TV show is on today that promotes a family with a mother and a father and children? That's the only one I think I'm aware of. Am I wrong? I think they had Blackish. That was another family show, but I hear it's now going off the air. So think about this in terms of what lives in people's minds. The family unit in our social construct, it's gone away. It's almost like out of sight, out of mind. And people, therefore, if they don't have something to look at, if they can't see or imagine or be thinking about something that brings goodness to life, purpose to life, life to life, and a sense of belonging to life, they repeat what they see. And if they're seeing a lack of marriage and married people with children, they tend to follow and mimic what they've seen. And so oftentimes when I speak, you've probably heard this over the years, the times that we've spoken, I attribute a lot of the malaise in our society to what our modern day media culture presents.
So people by the tens of thousands should be watching this and listening. Now, granted, we are a different generation than a number of the people we're speaking about, i.e. millennials. But I have a millennial, you have millennial, you have millennials, Diane. So we know something about them, even though we don't really know about them. I'll tell you one story, but I want to just mention to you there's a couple of words that you mentioned that I wrote down that I think are absolutely wondrous, Maura, and that is commit. You said it twice about coming in love, but then recognizing, okay, that's the emotion. Now, what do I do about it in a sense of growing in life? And that is making a commitment. Diane spoke about it, the ability that already speaks about becoming adult, making a commitment. And you talked about shift. Now, shift is an interesting word. I use it when I do my podcast, and I do it tongue in cheek. I say the problem with shift is that most people somehow drop the F when they pronounce that word. I don't know why. So instead of shift happens, the other thing happens. So you got to be really careful how we talk about shift. And I have been thinking lately about the word family, and I came up just this afternoon with an acronym for family, which stands for da-da-da-da, father and mother, inspiring, living wisely.
Wisely?
Wise.
Why?
You.
Why?
Wise. Got it.
Hello, you got to be expansive. Don't just think a why can be a you or wisely. Why? A father and mother inspiring, living wisely. That's what we're talking about here. The ability of family to project the image that we want for people to have. And you're right. I'll tell you a quick story, even though our time is running. I was doing an interview the other day, and the fellow was interviewing me, very pleasant, well-educated, 36 years old, and he's about to get married this year. Okay, I didn't ask how old his fiance is, but he's 36. So he's finally gone to the point where he realizes, I should get married because I want to get married. I want to find somebody. Okay. And we talked about a couple of things. And I mentioned, he asked me a question. I started singing, getting to know you, getting to know all about you, getting to know you, hope you like me. You know that song, right? That is a famous Broadway tune from My Fair Lady, et cetera, right? Something like that. So the point is, he looked at me with this querulous look, quizzical. I said, you know that, don't you? He said, no. You never heard of My Fair Lady? No. You never heard the music? No. No, I'm twice his age. In other words, it's a chasm. And then we were talking about something, and he asked me about another particular item, and I said, "Oh, wow, WWW stands for What a Wonderful World." And I started singing. I said, thanks to Louis Armstrong Satchmo for that great song. And again, this look came over and said, you don't know that song, What a Wonderful World? Now, by the same token, I have no idea what shows are existing on television because we don't have a television. And I wouldn't know what songs are popular today because it's just not what I listen to or choose to listen to. Michael's still in the 1800s when he listens to it. I listen in the 1960s. Okay. The point is that it was so fascinating to me to be able to speak to another highly educated, interesting person who had we had no consensus on certain things that I presumed were there. If you don't know much about Broadway shows, not that I go around dancing Broadway shows and such, but by the same token, by the way, you can ask me about Hamilton. People tell me the music is wonderful and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, I'm admitting it. I never heard it. And I don't make the time to listen to it. But the point is that of course, if I asked him about Hamilton, he said, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So there is an interesting cultural gap that you're right, the projection of the family and the media. So the last family show that I remember, and I still like watching some of the reruns every once in a while when I do a quick search, is All in the Family. But that was such a, it was, you know, it was about family, and it was about family and the ability to overcome even the clashes, the political ideas by using laughter. And part of what we don't have, and it's one of the other questions that came in, by the way, about talking about the Pope and Elon Musk and millennials and all these stuff. We had 15 questions that were, I have no idea where they came from. I said, can you please speak about laughter? Because it seems that people are deprived of laughter. In other words, we speak about marriage, we speak about children, we even speak about pets. But and we're talking about nice, cuddly, good things, but nobody's really talking about just laughter, the ability to sort of tickle oneself. I mean, I happen to do, one of my skill sets is I laugh out loud. I enjoy doing it. I was taught 50 plus years ago by a remarkably successful entrepreneur. It was a she, just remarkably beautiful, articulate woman who built up an empire in the jewelry business. And she taught me, she says, Shore, I like you. I'm going to tell you my secret of success. You ready? And she did this. And she must have gone on for 50 seconds laughing. I said, what's the secret? She said, that's the secret. You need to laugh every day. So we only have a few more minutes, but I'd like to, if you'd be so kind, Diane, in a few minutes and then more in a few minutes, what is it do you think is happening at the moment that there is this, I'll call it a lack of laughter? If I'm not mistaken, by the way, maybe I'm wrong. I'm just giving 15 questions to that same point.
Well, okay. I mean, there are some contexts that have laughter. As I said, when you're around little kids, you can't help but laugh and smile. So there are some contexts where it's just endemic to the wonderful environment, and laughter is there. You don't even have to do anything. You just see what these beautiful little children are exploring in the world, and it just fills you with joy, and you laugh. Laughter is also contagious. And if you hear someone laughing, like you were laughing, we're sitting here on camera, smiling and laughing too. And so you have to get the ball rolling with the laughter. And I don't think there are that as many opportunities because people are not able to congregate during the pandemic. And I think it takes more than one person. Sometimes you'll be with a good friend and you'll see something and you have such a close bond with that person that it makes you laugh, and the other person catches on, and you get into a laughter fit. And it's so cleansing and so uplifting and so wonderful that afterward you feel it was therapy. And there is actually something called laugh therapy. I've read about it. I don't know exactly what they call it. I think it's called laugh therapy, where people get together and all they do is laugh. They just congregate to laugh.
I've been in sessions like that.
You've been to that. And so it's clearly something people want, crave, are willing to pay for, enjoy, repeat. And I think any family is able to do that. All they have to do is start talking about it. Just say, here's the funniest thing that happened to me today. Here's why it was so funny. Or it can be, we need to laugh. Who wants to start it? And one person laughing will just keep the whole rest of the room laughing. The key is you can't be alone. Well, I guess you can. You can have a stimulus that's on a screen. That's why people like comics. They'll go to a comedy show because they want to laugh. They enjoy the laughter. And so I agree with you, there's not enough of it. One thing that you can always do, and I think is so important, is whenever you greet somebody, smile. Anybody in your path, anybody at the store, especially people in wheelchairs or mothers who seem to be discombobulated carrying so many things, people who need it, just smile, just be nice. If we can just increase the nicety in our culture, we will have more laughter, we will have more happiness, we'll have less dysfunction, we'll have less depression, which is unfortunately endemic to the pandemic. And I think that you're right. And so it's so important, Barry, when you say, where's the laughter? It starts in here. It starts in here. And you could even just for yourself say, I'm going to laugh at this, or get a Gary Larson comic book and just start looking at it, and you'll start laughing and you will feel better. So laughter can be created by one, it multiplies by two, and by three, and by the family. And if you have a spouse, that's the best thing, because you have so much history to share and so much joy that you can relive. Take out the photo album and look at your kids when they were little, and you'll remember so many things to laugh about. It will really enrich your life.
That's Dr. Diane Medved giving us all a really good RX. Laura, come on home, baby. What do you think about laughter?
Obviously, I like it. I think this is a great way to end tonight's Zoom call, because you know what? We don't have laughter in this world unless we choose to employ it and to share it. And most of our culture, you're right, I think we were already on the way before this pandemic started. Too much pressure, too much negativity, too much negative news, too much division. And well, you will remember, it was all over politics. Then it became all over COVID. But here's what I always look at. Nobody will start the laughter or the fun unless we start it. We can't always wait for somebody else to do it to us. And I will tell you, in our marriage, my husband is the fun one. I am the serious one. He said to me all the time, you realize, Maura, he said, you would have blown up somewhere if you didn't have me in your life, because he comes in the morning and dances. I'm like, what are you doing that for, Jimmy? Concentrate. And the two of us will just crack up. So the dynamic of having somebody else that's a fun, loving person is so good and so uplifting. And you feel like a child again. So I thought, yeah, Jimmy, it's a good thing I didn't marry somebody serious. He's very responsible, but he loves to have fun. Now, I want to offer a couple of other things, because we do live in a very serious society, and it's so great for the problems, the issues, the challenges we have in life. If we could learn to laugh our way through and find something humorous about it or make light of it, it makes life that much easier, and we tend to persevere a lot more. I just want to mention a couple of other things. Right now, I was saying we pull the plug on cable. Barry, you said you don't have it. I don't know about you, Diane, if you watch TV. It was so much of it was nastiness. It makes everybody angry. But going back to our daughter and son-in-law, they don't have TV. The two of them are always playing games together, and then they have company that'll come. So they're big with board games. That's a fun thing you could do with your family. You could do it with some neighbors. I know soon, we're supposed to be this week, but we have very cold weather. We're going to do something outside here in Florida. And it's a board game I've yet to do. And it's one of those you have to just play with it as you go along, and you have to make up most ridiculous expressions. And you put people in those situations. And even if you're not a funny person and you're with a group of people, you find fun. And I want to offer something else, the old parlor games. And the reason why I offer this is because you do need to turn off the TV sometimes, and you do need to kind of get out of yourself. People back in the day used to play parlor games. They cost nothing. I don't know if you know even what I'm talking about, but it could be like
they don't. They think parlor is PARLER, which is an alternative to Twitter or YouTube. No, they don't know what parlor. They don't even know what a parlor is in your home. We'll call it living room games. Living room games.
That's right. I don't even think they call it a parlor anymore. But they were games that everybody would play when they would get together. And I will tell you, we used to do this as our family. We'd go down to the Jersey Shore. Sometimes we'd have rotten weather, and we would all, every age, would get together and we would play these games, and people would be roaring out loud with laughter, because you could get the smartest people that can't figure out dumb games.
Right.
The first ones to figure it out. And so things like that are great ways to bring levity and lightness to life. And I'll just say, we all have to find a way to be a part, to create that, because when you do, you shift the atmosphere.
Remember, shift. Don't drop that F.
Diane said, like,
Shift happens.
Diane said you have to, learn to smile at everybody. I do that. I will go out. I think I've told you this, to the grocery store, and I'll start conversations with perfect strangers. And I'll always find something fun to laugh about. And it's up to us to make it happen, because we are the ones that change the world. We influence the world. We become, and I don't mean models like aren't we great? It's not that. A new model. There are many things our world is missing, but rather than complaining about it, why can't we be that example so people can say,
well, we're going to be. So
I think I'll follow it.
our time goes by so fast. So instead of doing our traditional hug, HUG stands for heartfelt, unlimited giving, we will do a group laugh. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Ha ha ha! Thank you, wonderful Dr. Diane. Thank you, fabulous Laura. And to all, a good night.